The laughter didn't start right away. It came a beat after the words, just long enough for the sting to bloom, when my father lifted his champagne glass under the chandelier glow and announced to anyone within earshot, "Julia has never been able to keep a job. Not one." The room didn't fall silent, but the reaction was worse. The knowing smirks, the lifted brows, the amused glances traded across linen-covered tables. Evan let out a short, sharp laugh, the kind meant to puncture rather than entertain. "Seriously," he added, "nobody keeps her for long." I felt my hand tighten around the back of my chair, knuckles whitening. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I simply stood there, absorbing the blow in the middle of a ballroom I hadn't even wanted to attend. The Winter Arts fundraiser in Shorehaven wasn't flashy, but the community treated it like a yearly coronation, soft light sequined dresses, old friends performing niceness for sport. My mother insisted I attend. "It'll look good for you," she'd said. "You never know who might help you settle down, find something stable." Stable. The word clung to me like a label I never agreed to wear. From the dessert table, the warm scent of sugar drifted across the room, a sweetness that felt at odds with the bitterness rising in my throat. Around me, people pretended not to listen while leaning in just enough to hear more. Shorehaven always loved a story, especially the kind told at someone else's expense. That internship fiasco when she was 18 should have been a sign, Evan added loudly. He didn't glance at me. He didn't need to. He spoke as though I were furniture present, silent, decorative. My mother finally noticed the sudden hush at our table. She leaned forward with a strained smile. "Oh, for heaven's sake, she just hasn't found her place yet." Another dressed-up way to say disappointment. That familiar heat rose behind my eyes, and I stepped back from the table before it could spill over. But I hadn't taken more than 2 steps when the stage lights flickered. Someone from the organizing committee tapped the microphone and shouted, "We have breaking news, hang on!" The chairs shifted, heads turned. Curiosity overtook cruelty in seconds. My mother nearly jumped to her feet. "Turn it on!" "Hurry." The projector screen blinked to life. Time magazine. A collective gasp spread across the ballroom. "They're revealing the Women of the Year shortlist early," someone murmured. A wave of attention washed forward, pulling the room toward the glowing screen, leaving my humiliation suspended midair, unfinished, interrupted. I slipped toward the hallway, letting the distraction swallow every pair of eyes that moments earlier had been judging me. Out here, the corridor was cooler, quieter, lit by the softer glow of string lights from the courtyard. I braced a hand against the wall and exhaled slowly. I thought I'd grown numb to their comments by now. 32 years should have been enough time to build calluses. But some things didn't dull. Some cuts always found unhealed places. The ballroom door clicked open behind me. Jenna stepped out, coat draped over one arm. "Hey," she whispered. "That was rough. I'm fine." My voice sounded steady, too steady. "It didn't look fine," she murmured. "They shouldn't talk about you like that." We stood side by side for a moment, neither of us moving. Applause rose from inside the ballroom, loud, sustained. Someone must have been named, someone whose life wasn't being dissected over salad plates. "You don't have to go back in," Jenna said softly. "I will," I replied, even though I didn't know why yet. When she went back inside, silence settled again. I stayed where I was, the cool air easing the sting in my cheeks. Something inside me shifted, not into anger, not into sadness, but into a quiet refusal. A steady, unmistakable no against shrinking to fit their version of me. Then my phone buzzed. A message request. A name I'd never seen. Time. Editorial board inquiry regarding your submission. I stared at the notification, the bold letters pulsing against my screen like a heartbeat. I hadn't submitted anything. Not officially. Not yet. The ballroom erupted again. Cheers, applause, the rustle of excitement. And then my mother's voice rose above the noise, urgent and breathless. "Where is she?" I stepped back through the doorway before she could start searching the hallway. Inside, she found me instantly. Her smile was already forming, the practiced one, the one meant to smooth over whatever mess lay beneath. "There you are," she said, gripping my arm. "You missed the announcement. It was... Well, never mind, we'll talk about it later. Don't." My voice was quiet, but the word was solid. Her smile faltered. What do you mean, don't I mean? Stop trying to cover it up. Stop pretending it didn't happen. My father looked up. Evan stopped mid-laugh. They recognized the tone one I'd never used with them before. I sat down at the table again. Not for politeness, not for peace. I sat because leaving would have felt like confirming their version of me. The room erupted into applause again, but I didn't join in. I simply watched the stage lights ripple across the tables, watched the faces turn toward the celebration, watched everything move forward around me. Something was changing. Not in them. In me. The morning arrived with a pale, washed-out light that slipped between my blinds as if it had been waiting for me to wake. I wasn't ready. My mind still lingered in the half-shadow of last night, my father's voice echoing across the ballroom, Evan's laughter carving its own wound, the way my mother pretended she could tidy humiliation with polite smiles. I tried to stay still, suspended in the last quiet seconds before reality found me again. The phone on my nightstand shattered that silence. A string of vibrations. Then another, and another, each one sharper, more urgent than anything my family group chat ever produced. I reached for it lazily, expecting post-Gala damage control, but the lock screen froze me. Time magazine, CNN Business, 70+ mentions on LinkedIn, 3 unfamiliar press outlets, and a notification from an email address I'd never seen. My eyes widened as I tapped the first alert. Time announces First Woman of the Year, Honorary Community Innovation category goes to my name. My name is in bold. Spelled correctly, framed under the Time masthead like it belonged there. The breath left my chest in a single slow release I didn't know I'd been holding for years. Message after message flooded in, journalists asking for interviews, producers requesting pre-calls, women from across the country sending paragraphs about how my work had changed their lives. My thumb scrolled stunned until an email near the top made my heart jolt. Aaron Thompson. Subject, I hope you're not angry. Found your files, cleaned them up, submitted the packet for you. You should have been here years ago. I only gave them what you already built. I pressed my palm to my forehead. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. A soft knock broke the spell. Julia. My mother's voice slipped through the door before I could respond. She stepped in with the same careful posture she used around holiday arguments, as if walking too quickly might break something fragile. I wanted to talk, she said, about last night. I held the phone against my leg screen, glowing with alert after alert. Did it get out of hand? I asked. You know how your father is. Her voice tried for lightness but couldn't reach it. He thinks teasing makes things easier. It didn't make anything easier, I said. And Evan, she began. No, I cut in. Let's not pretend he didn't mean what he said. Her face tightened, not from defensiveness, but from impact. We were tired, she whispered. It was a long night. My silence this time wasn't passive, it was deliberate, and she felt that. Her gaze drifted to the phone in my hand. Why is Time magazine messaging you? Before I could tuck it away, a preview banner lit up the screen. Are you available for a national segment tomorrow? She inhaled sharply. Julia, what is happening? I placed the phone in her palm. Her eyes skimmed the headline. Then I froze. Is this real? She whispered. It's real. When did you apply? I didn't, I said. Aaron sent it in. Her lips parted, stunned. Someone else believed in you that much. The question landed deeper than she knew. Yes, I said quietly. She lowered herself onto the edge of my bed, shoulders sinking. We support you, she said after a long pause. I didn't raise my voice, didn't harden it, just spoke the truth she'd spent years avoiding. You support the version of me that makes sense to you, not the one that exists outside your expectations. A faint crack crossed her expression. Regret or recognition? I wasn't sure. Your father will want to talk, she murmured. I'm sure he will, I said. But he'll need to wait. Her eyes lifted in surprise. Boundaries were new to her. To all of them. Another alert buzzed against my leg. Time. Editorial pre-interview in 1 hour. Please confirm. She stood slowly. I'll let you get ready. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving the room impossibly quiet. I turned toward the mirror across from my bed. The woman looking back wasn't the one they reduced to a dinner table joke, not the one who tiptoed around their disappointment, not the one who tried to justify dreams they never bothered to understand. There was something steadier in her posture now, something sharper behind her eyes. My phone vibrated again. I picked up. "This is Julia," I said, voice even sure. The producer introduced herself, already moving quickly through logistics, scheduling, lighting, travel. I followed along, letting the rhythm of her confidence replace the remnants of last night's shame. And while she talked, something in me finally, irrevocably, clicked into place. The story they'd told about me no longer had any power, because the world finally had started telling a different one I'd spent my entire life building, one they couldn't shrink, rewrite, or laugh away. Not anymore. My hair was still damp when the first call came through, vibrating across the bathroom counter, hard enough to rattle my toothbrush. Dad's name glowed on the screen, familiar and unwelcome. I let it ring untouched. A second attempt followed, before the missed call banner even faded. Then a third, then one from Evan. Their urgency pooled like water pressing against a door. I ignored them all. The fourth call came disguised by an unfamiliar number. I answered, expecting a producer, not a reckoning. Julia, Dad's voice rushed in, tight-winded, almost frantic. "Why haven't you picked up?" "We've been trying all morning." I rested my back against the counter. "I noticed. Your mother showed me the article." Time magazine. "What is going on? When did you apply?" "I didn't." "What do you mean you didn't?" "Someone submitted my work for me." The line went quiet, but not with pride, more like stunned recalculation. "Well, he tried. You should have told us sooner. This is big." "You didn't want updates," I said evenly. "I learned a long time ago not to bring my dreams to a table that only offered criticism. That's not fair," he said, voice tightening into the old familiar defense. "You called me unstable in a room full of people." "That was fair." He exhaled sharply. "Not out of guilt, out of discomfort. We need to sit down tonight. The whole family. Talk this out. I'm not available. You can make time." "No," I said. "Not today. I have a pre-interview with Time at 6. A beat. Then another. "Julia, are you saying you're actually doing this?" "I am." His silence wasn't awe. It was disbelief, like I'd stepped out of the role he'd assigned me. "Evan's office is getting calls from reporters," Dad finally muttered. "This blindsided us." I closed my eyes. "Of course it did. I'll talk to you when I decide to," I said quietly. Before he could object, I ended the call. Not 30 seconds passed before texts erupted in rapid succession. "Evan, is this real? You should have warned us. Reporters are asking questions. This makes us look unprepared. Us. Prepared. As if my success needed to be coordinated around their comfort." A knock sounded soft, hesitant, unmistakably my mother's. I opened the door to find her holding a coffee from the cafe she always claimed was too bitter to enjoy. "I thought you might need this," she said. Her voice didn't have its usual firmness. She seemed smaller, unsure of where to stand in this new version of my morning. I read everything, she continued. The articles, the comments, the list. Her eyes lifted slowly. "I didn't understand how much you'd built. You never asked." The words were quiet, but they landed with precision. She lowered herself into the chair by my window, smoothing her vest with trembling fingers. "We misjudged things," she said. "Your father, your brother, me." A pause. "We thought you were drifting. We didn't see the pattern." "You weren't looking," I replied. "It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the notification and let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. "The mayor wants to recognize you at next month's luncheon. And Evan says his coworkers can't believe they didn't know you were doing any of this. Of course he cared about that part." She looked around my apartment as if seeing it and me for the first time. "Everything is changing so quickly. It tends to," I said, "when people stop expecting you to stay small." Her gaze lifted, pained but honest. "When can we talk as a family?" "When you're ready to hear me," I said. She nodded slowly. "All right." My laptop chimed with an incoming email. I glanced at the subject line. "Time editorial team segment script attached for review." Her breath caught again. "They really chose you." I didn't smile. They did. She rose, lingering by the doorway. "I'll let you work. And Julia, I'm trying. I know." She closed the door softly behind her. The quiet that filled the room afterward wasn't empty. It was spacious, like a door had been nudged open somewhere inside me. Morning light stretched across the floor, warm and steady, touching every corner of a life that was suddenly expanding faster than anyone else could pace themselves to. My phone rang again, this time from the producer's number. I answered immediately. "Julia here." The steadiness in my voice surprised me, not because it was new, but because it finally felt like it belonged. The email didn't arrive with any urgency. No bold red marks, no dramatic subject line. It slipped into my inbox so quietly that I almost scrolled past it until the sender's name caught my eye and made everything else disappear. Time Women of the Year Committee. My pulse tightened. I clicked. The message unfolded, line by line, measured and formal, as if someone had placed each sentence with deliberate care. "You are formally invited. 3-day finalist summit, New York City. Honorary roundtables. Mentorship assignment." My eyes stopped at the name at the bottom. Mentor, Maya Reyes. For a moment, the apartment felt impossibly still. Maya wasn't just a leader, she was the force people rearranged rooms for. When she walked into a hearing, senators adjusted their questions. Cities restructured pilot programs because of her research. She didn't accept mentees unless she believed they carried something worth fighting for. If she had been paired with me, the picture of my future was suddenly larger than anything I'd allowed myself to imagine. I exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that loosens something deep in your chest. The phone rang. "Erin, you saw it right," she said. "Yes. You're breathing. Trying," I admitted. A soft laugh crossed the line. "Julia, none of this is random. Don't treat it like luck." After we hung up, movement felt necessary. My apartment couldn't hold the jolt inside me. I stepped outside and let the cold air settle my nerves as I walked toward the place that had shaped more of my life than any job title had the community center. The doors were propped open. A rush of winter air drifted through the hallway. Kids sprinted from room to room. 2 women in their interview clothes whispered next to the job board. A volunteer taped up flyers for next week's class. Everything was exactly as it always was. Yet something felt newly lit, as if I could suddenly see the threads connecting every moment I'd spent here. Marla spotted me. "There she is," she said with a grin that felt like a quiet celebration. "Good news pulls people right back to the source. I needed a place that didn't ask anything of me," I said. "This place owes you more than you owe it," she replied. "Don't forget that." We walked together toward the workshop room. Inside, laptops glowed across tables, lighting the faces of women who were rewiring their lives one step at a time. A few looked up. One lifted her phone. We read the article. "You earned that spotlight." Another stepped forward, voice steady but emotional. "Your program helped me get hired. I've been wanting to tell you." I swallowed carefully. "Thank you. Truly." Moments like these steadied something in me. Headlines were loud, but impact was quiet and far more real. In the back office, Marla leaned against the filing cabinet, arms crossed. "Your parents called," she said. I stiffened. "What did they want?" "A statement." Her expression sharpened slightly. "Reporters reached out to them, and suddenly they're aware of how they sound." I let the truth of that wash over me, familiar irony, but less painful than before. "They'll have to figure out their own script," I said. "They will," she replied, "and you'll keep moving." We set up chairs for the evening workshop. Women trickled in, some nervous, some eager, all of them carrying small hopes that felt heavier than they looked. Watching them reminded me why I'd kept going long before anyone cared. When I finally walked home, the sky had deepened to a quiet navy. Reflections from streetlights wavered in puddles along the sidewalk. A part of me felt further from the version of myself who had walked into the gala just days earlier, a distance that didn't feel like loss, but something closer to release. Inside my apartment, the silence felt different, less like absence, more like the space before a new beginning. Another email waited. "Your travel itinerary is attached." I opened the document. Flights, hotel, meetings arranged across 3 days, each one precise, intentional. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. They expected me to show up as someone with a seat at the table. I set my suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. The sound felt louder than it should have. I folded close slowly, pieces that felt right, not to impress, but to be myself without apology. A second document appeared, a short narrative for the opening session. Tell us the moment that shifted your work, the obstacle that forced a change, and the understanding you carried long before anyone else recognized its worth. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the prompt settle. My family had always described me through the smallest lens possible: unstable, inconsistent, someone who jumped around because she couldn't commit. They never paused long enough to understand the pattern they kept misreading. They didn't see the choices that built on each other, the foundation forming quietly beneath every transition. And now, for the first time, the world I'd been working toward had turned its head and said, "We saw what you made. Come stand here with us." I zipped the suitcase, my hand resting on the handle, as a steady sense of direction settled inside me. New York wasn't a reinvention. I wasn't correcting anything. Nothing about this moment was borrowed or fragile. It felt more like stepping onto a path that had been unfolding in front of me for years, one deliberate step after another, until finally the shape was clear. For once, I wasn't preparing to fit into someone else's version of success. I was walking toward a future that matched the woman I had become, quietly, steadily, and entirely on my own terms. New York greeted me with a bite of cold air as I stepped out of the cab in front of the hotel. Traffic pulsed along the avenue, horns echoing off the tall buildings like a restless heartbeat. I checked in quickly, rode the elevator to the 12th floor, and let myself into the room, simple, clean, quiet. For a moment I stood there, taking in the stillness, letting the whirlwind of the last 24 hours settle just long enough for me to breathe. The view from the window showed the city stretching wide in every direction. I watched the movement below, people weaving between crosswalks, couriers rushing past the curb, tourists lifting their phones toward the skyline, each one moving with a certainty I envied. I closed the curtains softly, not wanting to lose myself in observation when I needed to prepare. I set my suitcase aside and opened my laptop on the desk. Emails poured in faster than I could process them. Media requests, congratulations, invitations from organizations I'd only ever admired from afar. It was easy to feel overwhelmed by the volume, but I filtered through with clear intention. Tonight wasn't for responding. Tonight was for preparation. A message from the summit coordinator caught my eye. Your opening statement should be under 3 minutes. Focus on origin, impact, and intention. 3 minutes. Summarizing years of work and even longer years of doubt into such a narrow window felt impossible, but I began with a blank document and forced myself not to overthink. At first, the words came out stiff, hollow, like I was writing for someone else's voice. I deleted everything and started again. Maya's advice echoed in my mind. Don't memorize. Anchor. That shifted something. I stopped trying to impress and started trying to tell the truth. I wrote, "My work began because women weren't being heard. I built a framework so no one had to prove their worth from scratch every time life changed direction. Better, still not complete." I kept shaping the lines, trimming excess, adding clarity. Once the skeleton felt right, I muttered the words aloud, adjusting the cadence until the sentences carried the same weight on the tongue as they did on the screen. My throat tightened as I reached the final line. Reinvention does not collapse. It's construction. That stayed. I saved the draft and stood in front of the mirror. Speaking in my apartment with no one listening was one thing. Speaking here with the city outside and history inside these walls felt different. I held the printed statement in one hand, then set it down entirely. Talking to my reflection felt awkward for the first few seconds, but the discomfort faded quickly. I straightened my posture, reset my shoulders, and practiced until the words sounded like lived experience rather than a performance. A knock interrupted the rhythm. Room service delivering the tea I'd ordered without realizing how much I needed the warmth. As soon as the door closed, my phone rang. Maya's name lit up the screen. "You settled in?" she asked, trying to. "Good. Do one thing for me tonight. What is it? Watch the interview again. Not to critique yourself. Watch it to understand who everyone else is seeing. I hesitated. I don't know if I can do that without feeling self-conscious. You're not a novice anymore, she said. Get comfortable with being visible. After we hung up, I pulled up the interview and watched it start to finish. There was something strange about seeing myself speak with conviction I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge before. I paused midway, studying my own expression, steady, grounded, ready. I had underestimated that woman for too long. When it ended, I closed the laptop and took out the folder I'd prepared months ago, the one titled, Someday. Notes filled the pockets, sketches of program expansions, community partnerships, metrics from early trials, testimonies from participants. I spread everything across the desk, arranging the pages into clusters. Patterns emerged, results I hadn't highlighted, gaps I could address, stories worth sharing tomorrow if asked. For the next hour, I refined the talking points I hoped to bring into the breakout rooms. Concrete examples replaced vague ideas. Numbers accompanied narratives. The preparation steadied me far more than the view ever could. Eventually, I pulled out a small notebook and scribbled a list titled, What I Need When the Day Begins. Clarity, not perfection. Truth, not performance. Presence, not apology. I slipped the notebook into my bag. A restless energy still lingered, so I bundled up and stepped outside. The air had cooled further, brushing against my cheeks as I made my way down the block. Food carts steamed on corners, workers hurried into delis, a street musician coaxed a slow, aching tune from a saxophone. The city wasn't waiting for anyone yet. It felt like it had space for me. I stopped in front of a bookstore with its lights still on. Inside, a display showcased biographies of women who had shifted industries, communities, and movements. Their faces lined the shelves like sentinels. It struck me that every one of them had once stood at the beginning of something unfamiliar, uncertain, and immense. A clerk asked if I needed help. Just looking, I said. It wasn't books I needed. It was the reminder that stepping into a wider life was not arrogance. It was a lineage. Back at the hotel, I placed my notes, statement, and folder in a neat stack. No more revisions tonight. No rehearsing until exhaustion. Just enough preparation to walk into tomorrow with intention. I turned off the overhead lights and sat for a moment in the dim glow of the city seeping through the curtains. The quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt balanced like the pause before a door opens. Tomorrow nothing would be the same. Unlike the times I'd feared change, this time I felt ready to meet it. The door to Media Hall opened with a hush of air, the kind that follows a room built for important conversations. Light spilled across polished floors, reflecting off banners emblazoned with the Time logo. A soft hum filled the space. Journalists, honorees, photographers, organizers, everyone moving with purpose. For a heartbeat, I hovered near the entrance, the weight of the moment pressing warm and steady against my ribs. Then someone called my name. Julia. Over here. A woman with auburn curls and a sharp blazer waved enthusiastically. She introduced herself as part of the summit staff and guided me toward the front rows where other honorees were gathered. Every face in that cluster felt familiar, not personally, but in the way you recognize people whose stories you've read, women who'd built shelters, startups, scholarships, and systems that caught those falling through the cracks. I took a seat beside a woman with silver braids and dark, brilliant eyes. Her name tag read, Dr. Lena Carver, Medical Equity Pioneer. They placed us alphabetically, she said with a grin. Looks like you and I are neighbors for the week. Her presence radiated the calm confidence of someone who'd carved space in rooms that weren't built for her. I relaxed a little. A moderator stepped onto the stage, mic in hand. Welcome to the Women of the Year orientation. Over the next few days, you'll meet mentors, appear in media segments, collaborate on panels, and participate in policy roundtables. Phones buzzed with calendar updates. Cameras clicked. Pages rustled. The room felt like it was breathing. We're here, Lena whispered, because every woman in this room said yes to something most people said no to. The words sank deep. Across the aisle, a woman wiped her eyes discreetly. Another straightened her shoulders, as if reclaiming height she'd forgotten she had. A murmur of knowing hums spread through the section, a quiet chorus of recognition among strangers who were anything but. The orientation continued with introductions, instructions, and a flurry of paperwork. When it ended, we flowed into the networking hall, a bright space lined with tall windows overlooking the city. Coffee stations, soft jazz from hidden speakers, name badges glinting under warm lights. A staff member approached me with a clipboard. "You're scheduled for pre-interview prep in Studio B in 20 minutes. Maya's already there." I made my way down the hallway, the air shifting from open chatter to the cooler-controlled quiet of studio environments. Studio B was brighter than I expected. White walls, soft boxes, a table covered with notes, water bottles, and equipment. Maya stood near the monitors reviewing footage. She looked up, smiling. "Good timing. Ready to sharpen your story?" "As ready as I can be?" "Good," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Because the goal isn't to memorize, it's to anchor yourself." She slid a stack of cards toward me, each one with a possible interview question. "Let's start with the basics. Why your work?" I took a breath. Because the women who came through our programs weren't broken. They were misnamed. People labeled them inconsistent, unfocused, or lost, when really they were navigating impossible systems without support. I built a framework to show them they weren't starting over, they were carrying experience that mattered. Maya's smile widened. "That's your line, the one that shows who you are." We went through question after question, some expected, others sharp enough to catch me off guard. She challenged me to be clearer, bolder, warmer, less apologetic. Every answer felt like excavating a deeper truth I'd buried under years of self-doubt. "You're doing well," she said after the final round. "Now let's work on presence." "Presence?" I raised a brow. "People don't just hear your story, they feel it. Step into your authority. You earned it." Her words weren't loud, but they filled the room. A producer poked his head in. "We're ready for the walkthrough whenever you are." "Let's go," Maya said, nodding toward the door. We moved through a corridor toward a smaller studio where a mock interview setup had been staged. Chairs angled toward each other, soft lighting, a digital backdrop of the Time logo. I sat. The camera crew adjusted angles, a tech checked audio levels. Maya leaned in just before we began. "One thing, Julia, don't shrink when they praise you." I exhaled slowly. Noted. The practice interviewer took her seat. She introduced herself, waited for the cue, and began. "Julia, you've been recognized for transforming career mobility programs for women nationwide. What sparked your vision?" I answered steadily. The words flowed easier than I expected. She followed with deeper questions, moments of failure, points of insight, stories that once embarrassed me but now felt like stepping stones. "You seem grounded," she said during a break to adjust lighting. "Nervous at all?" "Very," I admitted, "but it feels like the kind worth having." The session ended with applause from the small crew. Maya handed me a bottle of water, her eyes shining with approval. "You're ready," she said. "Tomorrow won't scare you." We returned to the networking hall for the afternoon breakout sessions. Conversations hummed all around, ideas, strategies, laughter. Women swapping stories about impossible jobs, first wins, and battles fought in conference rooms where their names were forgotten until they produced something exceptional. At one point, Lena joined me at a high-top table. "You handled that session like someone who's been doing it for years." "I didn't expect to fit here," I said honestly. "Yet somehow, it feels familiar." She nodded, lifting her coffee. "That's because these rooms weren't built for us. But we're building new ones. And your work, it's opening doors for women who never should have been shut out." Her affirmation struck deeper than she knew. When the day finally ended, I stepped outside into the cool New York evening. Traffic hissed by. Neon signs blinked. The city stretched upward in steel and light, as if reminding me that everything ambition, growth, reinvention was allowed to reach impossible heights. I walked back toward the hotel, the sidewalk bustling around me, an energy humming through my body that felt both foreign and exactly right. For the first time, I wasn't intimidated by being surrounded by greatness. I felt at home in it. The studio lights felt warmer than they looked. A technician dabbed a bit of powder across my forehead, muttering something about shine, while cameras shifted on silent wheels around the set. The interviewer, a polished woman with sharp eyes and a voice made for national television, sat across from me reviewing her notes. She'd already greeted me, already told me she admired my work, and already asked if I preferred water or tea. None of that eased the thrum in my chest. Maya stood just behind the monitor's arms crossed, grounding me with a single look. "You earned this." Her expression said it, even if her mouth didn't. A cue light flashed. The room hushed. The interviewer straightened. 3, 2, 1. Her broadcast smile appeared instantly. "We are here with one of this year's Women of the Year honorees, Julia Morgan, recognized for her groundbreaking work in career mobility for women. Julia, thank you for joining us." The camera's red light blinked on. My palms were damp. "Thank you for having me." She leaned in, slightly professional warmth radiating from her posture. "Your program has reached women across the country, single mothers, displaced workers, women re-entering the workforce after years away. What inspired you to build something on this scale?" I didn't recite the script. Instead, I followed the thread that had guided me for years. "I kept meeting women who weren't lost," I said. "They were mislabeled. People saw inconsistency where I saw resilience. They'd been through layoffs, caregiving duties, toxic workplaces, and still kept trying to start again without support. I wanted to create something that helped them understand their experiences weren't failures, they were evidence of strength." The interviewer's expression softened. "That's powerful." "And personal." "It is," I admitted. I knew what it felt like to be underestimated. I didn't want other women to carry that alone. Camera 2 glided in for a close-up. I kept my shoulders even, my breath steady. "You're very open about your journey," she continued, "about the criticism you faced, the roadblocks, even the doubt from people close to you. What pushed you to keep going?" A version of that answer lived deep in me, built from years of swallowing comments that carved invisible bruises. "I kept going," I said quietly, "because every time someone dismissed my path, another woman walked through our doors asking for help." Their stories mattered more than the opinions that tried to shrink me. Behind the cameras, Maya nodded. The interviewer shifted her notes. "Let's talk about impact. Tens of thousands of women have used your framework. We spoke to some of them." I blinked. "You did?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "And the consistent message was that your program didn't simply give them a plan. It gave them permission to believe in themselves again." The warmth that filled my chest startled me. A producer stepped forward with a cue card wrap soon. "One last question," the interviewer said. "What do you hope comes next?" The future felt bigger than language, but I tried anyway. "I hope more women stop apologizing for wanting something better," I said. "I hope they see that reinvention isn't instability, it's courage." The interviewer's smile turned genuine. "Thank you, Julia." The red light blinked off. The room exhaled. Crew members relaxed. The tension that had held me upright dissolved into a rush of relief so strong I nearly laughed. "You did it," Maya said as she reached me. "And you did it well." Was it okay? My voice slipped out small, betraying a flicker of doubt. "It was more than okay," she said. "You spoke from the place that built your work. That's what people follow." The producer approached next. "Fantastic interview. Expect a lot of attention once this airs, press requests, speaking offers, maybe more partnerships. More." My pulse kicked up again. "Be ready," he added. "Your segment is one of the strongest we've filmed this year." The words struck with a force I hadn't prepared for. For so long, success had been something I imagined in private, not something handed to me by people whose jobs were to evaluate impact on a national stage. As the crew packed equipment, I stepped to the side to breathe. The studio felt different now, less intimidating, more like a place I belonged. Sunlight filtered through a high window, catching dust in quiet motion. My phone buzzed. A message from Aunt Melanie saw the teaser online. "You looked incredible. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." Another from a woman I'd never met. "Your work helped me find a job after 5 years of unemployment. Watching you today made me cry. Thank you." Then, one from an unknown number. "Is this Julia who built the Restart framework? We'd like to discuss a potential partnership for national rollout." My knees felt weak. Maya walked over, reading my expression instantly. "Good news, I think so." She laughed softly. Get used to it. We exited the studio into cooler air. The hallway outside buzzed with movement producers, honorees, assistants, staff, but the noise didn't overwhelm me the way it had earlier. Something inside had shifted subtle but firm. A woman from the summit staff intercepted us. Julia, you're scheduled for a roundtable this afternoon, policy and community impact. And Time wants a short behind-the-scenes clip for social media. I nodded, absorbing it all. And one more thing, she added. We're getting requests from viewers already. The preview was posted only 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes. My story hadn't even aired yet, people were responding. She moved on, and I stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the momentum wash over me. I wasn't floating, my feet were firmly planted, but the air around me felt different, charged, as if every path I'd once thought impossible was suddenly unfolding. Outside the building, New York hummed with mid-morning energy. Cars honked, street vendors served customers. People rushed past with a kind of determination that made the entire city feel alive. I realized I was moving at the same pace now, not to catch up, but because I was finally aligned with where I was meant to be. Before heading to the next session, I turned to Maya. Thank you, I said, for everything. She gave me a thoughtful look. Julia, don't thank me for seeing what was already there. And as we walked back inside, I felt something I'd waited years to feel, seen, steady and unapologetically ready for whatever came next. My phone rang just as I stepped out of the afternoon panel, the screen lighting up with a name I had no desire to see. My father. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me, less fear, more clarity, told me to pick up. I moved into a quiet corner of the lobby and answered. Julia, he said, rushing the word, as if trying to catch it before it could run from him. We just watched your interview. The background sounds muffled voices. The clink of dishes told me my family was gathered somewhere together. Maybe the living room, maybe the dining area. Wherever it was, the atmosphere sounded charged. Okay, I said, keeping my tone even. It was impressive, he admitted. The hesitation in his voice was unmistakable. Your mother cried. That startled me more than he probably realized. My mother didn't cry. She managed. She organized. She smoothed things over. What exactly did she cry about, I asked. That you didn't tell us, he snapped, frustration leaking through. That we had to find out with everyone else. There it was, the center of everything. Their pride wasn't about my work. It was about access, about control. You weren't listening, I said simply. You never asked about my work unless it was to criticize it. That's not fair, he said again, his favorite refrain. You said I was directionless, I reminded him. Last night at the gala, you told an entire table that I never stay long enough for anyone to keep me. He didn't respond. I didn't make that up, Dad. You said it. A long breath rattled through the line. I didn't mean it like that, he muttered. You know how people joke at events. You weren't joking, I said, calm but unwavering. And even if you were, it wasn't harmless. Someone in the background, my brother, probably whispered something. My father snapped at him to be quiet. We're trying to have a conversation here, he said defensively. I repeated. He faltered. Your brother has questions too. Of course he did. I heard a rustling. Then Evan's voice cut in. Why didn't you tell us this was happening? We could have helped. How did you help? I asked. By telling me to pick a more stable path again. That was years ago, he protested. It was last month, I corrected. You told me no serious employer would take someone with my resume. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, the exposed kind. Julia, my father said, finally, this is not how family handles things. Maybe not in your version of family, I said quietly. But I stopped playing my assigned role the moment you turned my career into a punchline. Another silence. Then the tone shifted, subtle but unmistakable. He softened. Look, he said, we didn't know what you were building. We didn't understand it. And now the whole country is talking about you. That's not my fault, I said. I didn't say it was, he replied. But it's a lot to take in. There it was, truth creeping in through the cracks. They weren't angry at me. They were rattled by a world that no longer matched their image of me. Before I could answer, a text buzzed through from an unknown number. Senator Holbrook would like to meet you tomorrow regarding workforce legislation. Are you available?" I stared at the message, stunned. "Julia," my father said, "are you still there?" "I am," I said, "but I need to be honest with you." I stepped farther into the corner, away from the crowd. "My work was never the problem," I said. "The problem was the way you talked about it, like it was a burden, an embarrassment, or something I should outgrow. You made me feel like every step I took was the wrong one." My father's breath hitched, a small crack in his carefully controlled tone. I didn't know he whispered. "I know," I said, "but I need you to want to know." The words landed heavily, even for me. In the background, my mother's voice broke through faintly. "Tell her we're proud of her." I closed my eyes against an unexpected sting of emotion. "Your mother says my father began." "I heard her," I said gently. My phone buzzed again. Time coordination. "Your behind-the-scenes clip is trending on social platforms." Another message, "Partnership inquiry. Your framework aligns with our national initiative. We'd like to discuss licensing." The world was moving fast, fast enough to leave behind the version of me my family still held. "Dad," I said, "I'm not angry. I'm just done shrinking in front of you." "I don't want you to shrink," he said quickly. "I just didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect you to understand it," I replied. My father sighed, a long, tired sound. "Will you come home after the summit? We want to celebrate. Celebration." The word didn't land wrong. It just landed late. "We'll see," I said truthfully. "There's a lot happening. But I'm not avoiding you." "I hope not," he said. The call ended without ceremony. No dramatic goodbye. Just the faint hum of a family scrambling to rewrite its story about me. I pocketed the phone and stepped back into the flow of the summit lobby, where women moved with purpose around me. Women whose stories held pain and ambition, regret and resilience just like mine. Only now I finally felt like someone who belonged among them. A staff member approached with a clipboard. "Julia, your roundtable is about to start. They've added an additional guest, someone from the Department of Labor." The world kept opening. Doors my family never imagined were swinging wide, and for the first time, I didn't flinch at the brightness on the other side. The ballroom glowed with soft amber light, casting warm reflections across glassware and polished tables. Guests drifted between conversations, the sound of their voices blending with the steady rise and fall of the string quartet on stage. I had barely stepped inside when a time coordinator approached, her expression alert. "They're about to run your segment," she said. "Come with me." I followed her through a curtain-lined corridor where cables snaked across the floor and monitors displayed rotating camera angles. One screen held a paused frame of my interview mid-sentence. Eyes steady, shoulders squared. The sight made my stomach flutter in a strange mix of disbelief and pride. Maya waited near the technical booth. She didn't speak right away. She simply gave me a look that told me she was both assessing and reassuring me at the same time. "You're ready," she said. The first honoree's video began. Applause carried through the wall. Then the second honoree. My pulse quickened. Up next, the host announced through the speakers, a woman whose work is reshaping the national conversation around reinvention and access. My name followed. The screen lit up with my face as the cameras captured the interview we'd recorded the day before. I watched myself talk about the women who'd walked through our program. Doors exhausted, hopeful, determined. And for the first time, I saw the version of myself that existed outside my family's shadow. Not scattered, not uncertain, not job-hopping. Someone who had built something real. Crew members around me murmured approval. When the segment showed a woman describing how she used my framework to regain confidence after years of unemployment, the audience in the ballroom reacted with a shift in breath, collective quiet. Even through the monitor, I felt it. The applause after the clip ended was unmistakable. Pure, wholehearted, not polite ceremony. A stagehand tapped my elbow. "You're on." The curtains parted, and I stepped into a wave of light so warm it felt like stepping into the sun. The host welcomed me with genuine warmth, not scripted admiration. As I moved toward the podium, the room's attention settled without tension, focused but not harsh. "You've given women a way to reclaim their narratives," she said. "What do you hope they take from your work?" I steadied my breath. I want them to understand that beginning again isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign they're still willing to move towards something better. A soft murmur of agreement lifted from the crowd, and I added their worth isn't defined by the labels they were given on their hardest days. The response felt like a wave, subtle but powerful. Once the formal portion ended, the room shifted back into conversation. People filtered toward me almost immediately, executives, community leaders, business owners, each with questions, ideas, invitations. It felt surreal yet strangely natural, as if this energy had been waiting for me to arrive. I reached for a flute of sparkling water at one of the tall tables when my phone began buzzing. One notification, then another, then 5 more. Mom, everyone's watching. The neighbors are talking about your segment. Dad, your name came up at the club tonight. People asked if we were related. Evan, I had coworkers sending me the video. This is wild. Their messages kept rolling in half awe, half panic. Another alert popped up. Time Digital. Your segment is trending. Fast. A second one followed. Partnership inquiry. We're interested in integrating your framework into our regional workforce initiative. My breath caught for a moment, not from shock, but from the sudden awareness of scale. Everything I had built in a tiny community center, everything I created during late nights with no one watching, was now echoing far beyond anything I'd imagined. Maya joined me by the table. A lot's happening, she observed. That might be an understatement. She studied my expression with a knowing smile. Feels different when people finally understand what you've been doing all along. She wasn't wrong. As the evening progressed, I heard pieces of conversations drifting through the room, women describing the moment they first realized they deserved better mentors, sharing stories of climbing out of impossible circumstances, leaders discussing pathways for change. Every voice blended into the sense that something larger than the event itself was unfolding. Lights dimmed slightly as the quartet shifted to a slower melody. The atmosphere felt softer now, less formal, more human. And while people continued approaching me with questions and congratulations, the overwhelming part had settled. What remained was a calm sense of alignment, like stepping into a place that fit without forcing anything. I moved toward the edge of the room to catch a breath, watching the soft glow of chandeliers flicker across the polished floor. The doors opened occasionally as guests slipped in and out each entrance, pulling in a sliver of cold New York air that vanished into warmth. For years, I'd wanted to be seen, not for the versions my family narrated, but for the truth I'd carried quietly. Tonight, that truth stood in the open. Not fragile, not defensive, fully formed. A message appeared on my phone, one line simple and direct. You've become the story. I looked around the room, taking in the applause, the conversations, the recognition that didn't require explanation or apology. For the first time, it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt right. The morning after the gala arrived with a gray sky hanging over Manhattan, the kind that pressed low against the rooftops and muted the usual city brilliance. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when a knock sounded at my hotel door, firm, deliberate, and entirely out of place this early. When I opened it, my parents and brother stood in the hallway, all 3 of them. My mother clutched her purse like a lifeline. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning me as if searching for permission to speak. Evan looked somewhere between shocked and defensive, which wasn't new, but the urgency in his posture was. We flew in this morning, my father said, the earliest flight we could get. The mix of surprise and irritation pooling in my chest didn't rise to my face. I stepped aside and let them in because the hallway wasn't the place for whatever this was becoming. They entered awkwardly, glancing around the room as if expecting answers in the furniture. My mother was the first to talk. Last night was something we weren't prepared for. Prepared, a strange choice of word. As if my life was an announcement they needed advance notice for. We saw your segment, she continued. People were talking about you, asking us questions, congratulating us. Everyone was so proud. I folded my arms. They congratulated you. A flush crept across her cheeks. Well, yes, it's a big moment for the family. My father stepped forward, clearing his throat. We want to understand what you're doing, Julia. Clearly this has grown into something serious. We didn't know the scope. You never asked, I said, not cruelly, just truthfully. That's not fair, Evan started. It's accurate, I cut in. Every time I talked about my work, you brushed it off or joked about how many jobs I'd had. My father stiffened. People joke. It doesn't mean anything. It meant something to me. Silence stretched between us. The city hummed outside the window, car horns, footsteps, fragments of voices drifting upward, while the four of us stood in a space too small for the history we carried. My mother perched on the edge of the chair near the window. We made mistakes, she said quietly. But seeing that room applaud for you hearing women talk about how you helped them, we saw you differently. Differently, I echoed. Or accurately, finally. Her eyes flicked up at me with something like remorse. Maybe both. Evan sank into the second chair, breathing out heavily. Look, I didn't realize you were doing all this. The program, the national partnerships, the recognition. It's just a lot to take in at once. You didn't realize because you didn't want to realize, I said. Paying attention would have meant admitting your assumptions were wrong. He winced and for once didn't fire back. My father paced near the bed. We didn't come here to fight, he said. We came because we were wrong. And we want to say that to your face. Those words landed heavy, not because I believed them immediately, but because I'd never heard anything like them from him before. I'm listening, I said. He stopped pacing and looked at me directly. I shouldn't have said what I did at the gala, not in front of all those people, not ever. I thought I was being funny. I wasn't, and your brother's comments weren't okay either. Evan ran a hand down his face. I know, I messed up. I didn't think so. That was the problem, I replied. My mother clasped her hands together. We didn't understand your choices. You seemed scattered, always changing jobs, always chasing something new. We thought you'd settle down eventually. I never asked to settle down. I asked to grow. She swallowed, and we didn't see that. For a moment the room softened. Their faces, guilt, confusion, love, tangled with expectation, looked painfully human. Not villains, not monsters. Just people who'd been operating from fear disguised as certainty. My father stepped forward again, slower now. I'm proud of you, he said, the words stiff but sincere. Truly. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Thank you. We want to be part of this, he added. Your success, your work, your world. I held his gaze. Only if you respect it. We will, he promised. Another knock sounded at the door, this one light, quick. When I opened it, a time staffer stood with a tablet in hand. Julia, your next session starts in 15 minutes. The transportation team is ready when you are. I'll be down soon, I said. She nodded and disappeared down the hall. I turned back to my family. I have to go. My mother rose from the chair. Can we meet again later? Dinner, maybe? Maybe, I said. I'll let you know. She hugged me tentatively, as if unsure of the permission she'd been granted. My father squeezed my shoulder in a way that told me he was trying, even if he didn't know how. Evan lingered a moment, then surprised me with a quick, awkward hug. When the door finally shut behind them, I stood there in the quiet, letting the weight of the encounter settle. Something had cracked open, not fully healed, not fully fixed, but changed. For the first time, they had stepped into a room shaped by my work, not their expectations. They had walked into my world instead of demanding I return to theirs. I grabbed my bag and headed for the elevator. The lobby was alive with the energy of the summit women in confident strides, staff coordinating schedules, the kind of purposeful motion I'd never seen in my hometown. As I stepped outside, a car pulled up. The driver leaned out. Julia Morgan. Yes, welcome. We're heading to the policy roundtable now. I slid into the back seat. The city loomed ahead, wide and bright, despite the overcast sky. My phone buzzed again. A message from the summit organizers. Your interview numbers passed 1 million views overnight. Congratulations. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The day wasn't waiting for me to finish processing. Life had moved forward, and I was finally moving with it. The elevator doors slid open to a floor washed in pale morning light. A long row of windows revealed the river below, slate-colored and calm, while staff hurried between tables arranging microphones, water glasses, and thin folders labeled with each participant's name. Mine sat near the center, angled toward the head of the table, Julia Morgan, Workforce Innovation. I took my seat and let the view steady me. The room didn't feel intimidating. It felt expectant, like a stage waiting for someone to step into her own story without flinching. Maya entered moments later and sat beside me. "You're opening the discussion. They want your framing, not just your data." "Got it," I said, though my pulse jittered a little. Advisors filed in gradually. State directors, nonprofit strategists, researchers. Their conversations were low and quick, the kind people have when they're used to tight agendas. Senator Holbrook appeared last, her presence shifting the room's tone instantly. She shook hands as she walked, offering the kind of greetings that carried her reputation warm but precise. When she reached her seat across from me, she gave a small nod. "I watched your interview twice," she said. The country responded for a reason. Before I could answer, the moderator called everyone to attention. "Thank you for joining us. To start, we've asked Julia Morgan to speak on the structural issues affecting women re-entering the workforce." All eyes turned toward me. I placed my hands on the table not to anchor myself, but to claim the space, and began. "Most women don't lack ability," I said. "They lack recognition. And we've built entire systems around the belief that experience only counts if it's salaried." A few brows lifted, but in curiosity, not skepticism. I continued. "Let me give you a story. It matters more than any chart I could bring." The room quieted. 2 years ago, a woman named Denise came into our community center. She'd spent nearly a decade caring for her father through a long illness. When he passed, she tried to return to work, but every interview ended in the same rejection. She told me, "I've been doing everything for 10 years, but none of it counts." I paused, watching their faces. She had coordinated medical schedules, managed insurance appeals, tracked medications, communicated with specialists, and handled crises daily. Yet every employer saw the same thing on her resume, a gap. A policy analyst leaned forward, slightly, elbows resting on the table. When we translated her experience into competencies, I said she qualified for roles in logistics, patient advocacy, and operations. 3 months later, she landed a full-time job coordinating care for an entire facility. Her supervisor told me she was the best hire they'd made in years. A hush spread over the table, not silence, but something more thoughtful. "That's what the Restart framework does," I said. "It doesn't fabricate skills, it reveals them." The senator spoke next, folding her hands. "Stories like Denise's aren't isolated. We've heard versions of them for years, but rarely with a structure to support solutions. How would your framework scale to statewide implementation?" "Through partnerships," I replied. "Community organizations already have the trust. States have the resources. If we build a bridge between them, we can train local leaders to run the framework with consistency." She considered this. "And how do we measure results? Legislators won't move without clear metrics. Placement rates, retention, self-reported confidence skills, mapping accuracy. And one more thing, employer feedback. We've collected endorsements from companies who hired participants after reframing their experience. Those voices carry weight." The room shifted again. Not dramatically, just a quiet leaning forward. A director from the Midwest tapped his pen. "What about women who faced instability or trauma? How does the model account for that?" "By meeting them where they are," I answered. "Not everyone steps in ready for a job search. Some need affirmation first. Some need help naming their value. Some need trauma-informed support. We have modules for each stage. The point isn't speed. The point is dignity." He nodded slowly. Maya didn't say a word throughout the exchange, but her gaze held steady on me, firm and approving. She didn't need to step in. The work carried itself. The conversation deepened. A researcher asked about cross-state consistency. A nonprofit director wondered whether the framework could integrate into existing programs. I responded with examples from pilot communities, noting what had worked, what hadn't, and how adaptability mattered more than rigid replication. Then the senator leaned back in her chair, studying me with an expression that felt less like evaluation and more like recognition. "Julia," She said you're describing a shift in cultural perception, not just policy. Yes, I said. Because policy without narrative won't move. People vote for stories before they vote for legislation. If we want change, we need to change how we talk about women who start over. That landed. I felt it. The moderator eventually thanked everyone and brought the discussion to a close, but the energy didn't drop. As chairs pushed back and advisors gathered their notes, several approached me directly. One leaned in with a thoughtful frown. If you're open to it, I'd like to review your materials this week. This framework fills a gap we've been trying to name for years. Another asked for a meeting. A third requested more details about training local coordinators. None of it felt like a list of wins. Each exchange felt like a door cracking open. When the room finally thinned, Maya walked beside me toward the exit. That was the moment she said quietly, "The room didn't just hear you, they felt the story. I wasn't sure if I'd gone too personal." "No," she said. "You went human. Policy needs humanity more than it needs polish." We took the elevator down to the lobby. My phone buzzed with messages, but I didn't reach for it yet. The city outside gleamed through tall glass panes, the river catching streaks of light in slow-moving waves. "Are you ready for what's coming next?" Maya asked. "I think so." "Good," she said. "Because this isn't momentum anymore. This is a shift." The doors opened onto the cold afternoon air. People rushed past the entrance, locals, tourists, workers, but for once I didn't feel like I was moving against the current. The rhythm of the city didn't feel foreign anymore. I moved through it with a steadiness that surprised me. With each breath, something inside settled into place, as if the day had quietly shifted me toward the life I'd been building all along. And the doorway behind me no longer felt like an exit. It felt like a beginning. The city was already glowing with early evening lights when the final summit reception began. A warm buzz filled the hall, laughter, clinking glasses, a quiet sense of accomplishment that settled over the room like soft fabric. Honorees gathered in clusters, exchanging stories that sounded like confessions and victories woven together. I drifted through the space, taking in the faces I'd spent days learning, admiring, and aligning with. A staff member approached me with a tablet. "Your segment just passed 2.5 million views," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "It's the most shared of the year." The number didn't hit me like a shock. It washed over me slowly like warm water reaching the shore. I thanked her, and she moved on to another honoree. I stayed still for a moment, absorbing the sensation of my life widening yet again. My phone buzzed. "Dad, we're in the lobby. Whenever you're ready." Of course they were. I'd promised them a chance to talk, and this time I didn't feel dread pressing on my chest, only a quiet readiness. I made my way downstairs through a hall buzzing with guests and staff. The elevator doors slid open, revealing my parents seated on a leather bench, and Evan leaning against a column, hands shoved into his pockets. Their posture had softened since yesterday. Less defensive, more uncertain. My mother stood as soon as she saw me. "We didn't want to pull you away from anything important." "This is important," I said. They seemed to take that in carefully, as if the sentence carried more weight than I intended. My father spoke first. "We watched the round table online. Your part was impressive. You sounded steady, certain." I replied. "I'm glad." He hesitated. "I don't think we understood how much you'd grown." "It wasn't growth you didn't see," I said gently. "It was growth you didn't expect from me." That admission didn't sting him the way earlier truths had. This one settled into him slowly, almost gratefully. Evan stepped forward. "Can I say something?" His voice held an edge I didn't recognize, a responsible tone almost. "I talked to one of your program participants today. She found me through LinkedIn." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She said your framework helped her get a job after being out of work for years. She was crying on the phone." My breath slowed. "She reached out to you." "Yeah," he said, nodding. "She wanted me to know what you'd done for her, and for women like her." I needed to hear that from someone who wasn't family. My mother dabbed under her eye. "You built something good, sweetheart. Bigger than anything we imagined." "I know," I said softly. "We're trying," she whispered. "We don't want to lose you over our own blind spots." "You won't," I told her. "But I won't shrink to fit old expectations either. I don't want you to," she said. The honesty in her voice loosened something tight in my chest. A group of summit staff passed by, heading toward the ballroom. My father watched them go, and then looked back at me with a raw expression I'd rarely seen on him. "I'm proud of you," he said again, quieter this time, but more real. "Thank you." He cleared his throat. "Is there anything we can do to support you?" "Yes," I said. "Let me define myself, and let the rest come from there." My mother reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. We stood in an imperfect circle. 4 people who had hurt one another, misunderstood one another, but still cared enough to show up in a city far from home to try again. "I should head back upstairs," I said. "There's a closing program." "Of course," Dad replied. "We'll stay out of the way, but we'd love to see you after if you're willing." "I'll let you know," I said. "Tonight isn't just about me. It's about everyone here." They nodded, accepting the boundary with grace I wasn't sure they were capable of before this week. When I returned upstairs, the reception had swelled. The air carried a sense of finality mixed with celebration, like everyone knew something meaningful was ending and beginning in the same breath. Maya waved me over from a corner where she stood with a few board members. "How'd it go?" she asked once I reached her. "We're getting somewhere," I said. "Not perfect. But honestly, that's better than perfect," she replied. A cluster of honorees raised their glasses as the program director stepped up to the small stage near the center of the room. Conversations quieted. The music softened. A spotlight landed on the director, her smile warm and proud. "Tonight," she said, "we celebrate every woman who refused to step aside when doors closed. Every woman who built her own path. Every woman who stood up even when the world tried to talk over her. And every woman who's rewriting what leadership looks like." The room erupted with applause. Someone tapped my elbow. "Lena." "That last line was for you," she whispered. "Maybe for all of us," I murmured back. The director continued. "Before we close, we want to acknowledge one of our honorees, whose segment sparked a national conversation about reinvention and dignity at work. Julia, thank you for reminding the country that starting again is an act of courage." Applause swept through the room again, warm, genuine. I felt the recognition, but it didn't inflate me. It settled like something I'd finally grown strong enough to carry. After the applause died down, the music rose again. People returned to their conversations, but more than a few made their way to me, sharing their own stories, asking questions, thanking me for my work. I listened, I learned, I connected. It felt nothing like the nights I used to dread at family gatherings. This room held no judgment, only possibilities. As I stepped away from the crowd to catch my breath, the city's lights sparkled beyond the glass. For a moment, I let the view blur and sharpen again, letting the weight of everything settle fully. A staff member approached. "Julia, do you want to record a short message for viewers following the summit coverage?" I nodded. "Sure." She raised her phone, hit record, and I spoke not with rehearsed lines, not with careful placement, but with the truth that had guided every inch of this journey. If you're watching this and you've ever felt behind or uncertain or mislabeled, don't let that be the end of your story. You're allowed to take the long route. You're allowed to change direction. Reinvention is not weakness, it's momentum. The staffer lowered her phone, eyes bright. "That was perfect," she said. But it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was just me. As the night wore on and the crowd thinned, I finally stepped outside, letting the cool air wash over me. The streets shimmered with passing headlights. A siren wailed faintly, carried by the wind. I looked upward, letting the city's energy root itself in me. A long journey had brought me here. Every overlooked idea, every dismissed attempt. Every year my family misunderstood who I was becoming. None of it had been wasted. The air felt steady around me, almost warm despite the cold. And then, like a quiet thread pulling through the night, a memory surfaced the ballroom months ago. My father's voice carrying across white tablecloths as he told a crowd I couldn't hold on to a job, and my brother laughing as if my life were a punchline. Back then, their words felt final. Tonight, they felt small. Those short chapters in my resume weren't unstable. They were the trail markers that led me exactly here, with work that mattered, a room that recognized it, and a future built from choices that were mine alone. The men who once believed no workplace would keep me had never imagined I'd build something that didn't need anyone's permission to exist. And the woman standing here now, she wasn't looking to be kept. She'd created her own place to belong and stepped into it without apology. The city hummed around me, a glowing map of every direction I could go next. And for the first time, the ending wasn't something happening to me. It was something I chose.